Hi and welcome. This is a video for primarily people getting into record collecting, specifically jazz records in 2021. There's a lot of vocab and a lot of ways to rub people who fancy themselves serious vinyl types the wrong way. So I'm going to show you this record here, Saxophone Colossus, Sonny Rollins. This is a modern reissue, and give you a little bit of the lingo and some things to look out for. So first off, this is shrink wrapped, and some jazz reissues are shrink wrapped like this, and some come in an outer polyurethane, I guess. I don't know. It's just called poly bag. But it's common to see these stickers on here. So these are called hype stickers. This hype sticker is about the record series, and this one is about the pressing plant, QRP, Quality Record Pressings. More about that later. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the shrink wrap on here and tell you a little bit about the record and about the state of jazz collecting generally right now. A lot of people like to save these stickers or cut a slit in the shrink wrap. I'm not one of those people, but if you're interested in maybe selling the record later, you might save the stickers. I might save these stickers. I don't know. Okay, first thing, let's take a look at the sleeve here. It's got a little bit of damage. I don't really care too much about these things, but let me try to get it in the right light here so you can see it. It's got what people call a corner bump because the corner smashed into something. And it's a little bit off kilter, but in general, this is in pretty good shape here. It's a nice glossy cover, and this is a style called a tip-on jacket. So there's two main ways of making record sleeves nowadays. One is called direct to board, where it's a pretty thin cardboard sleeve that has the artwork printed on it. This is not that type. This is called a tip-on. This is kind of the old school way to do it, where this back piece here is a separate piece of paper. And if you look at it up close, you might actually be able to see this. Let me try to get it in the light the right way. But there's some kind of architecture here underneath the paper here that you can see. The front board was folded over, and then I can't quite catch the light the right way. But anyways, the edges of this thing were folded over, the front cover, the blue part. And then there was a white back here that was pasted on. So this is the kind of older traditional way to do it. It's a little more expensive, and that's kind of more sought after for nice reissues. One more thing to think about are what are called seam splits. Sometimes the record in transit gets kind of jostled around a little bit, and if it rattles around too much, it can actually start to break through the top or the bottom, sometimes even, look at that. Okay, it did happen. So this is a little bit of what's called a seam split here, where the record had some rough handling and started to come through here. The way to avoid seam splits is to ask to have the record opened and then shipped outside of the sleeve. That's really the only way to guarantee no seam splits. Not saying that's important or you should worry about that, but if it will bum you out to get a record with a seam split, that's really kind of the way you got to do it. That's about all I can think to tell you about the outside of a record in general terms. Okay. Now we've got the record. It's in the inner sleeve here. This is this style of inner sleeve is called a rice paper sleeve, and sometimes it's colloquially referred to as a MoFi inner. So MoFi stands for Mobile Fidelity Sound Labs. They make records. They also make sleeves, and their inner sleeve looks just like this, except it says Mobile Fidelity here. And so people just, even though this is a quality record pressing, a QRP inner, if I told somebody it was a MoFi inner and showed them this, they wouldn't think I was crazy. Handling the records, we should, well, you do what you want. But people will get antsy if you handle it by anything other than the label and the edge. So unsleeving it, you can kind of grab under the label here, pull it out, and now here is our record. So the main thing that you can maybe be exposed to and not really understand what's going on is all of the hoopla around what's called the mastering of the record, or just the specific version of this. Because this is a brand new record, but if you were to look at the original Sonny Rollins saxophone Colossus, if I have one in good shape, from this perspective, it would look pretty similar, right? This label is a recreation of the original label. Yeah, it even says copyright 1954, although the original one probably didn't. The key here is really the information in what's called the runout, or sometimes called the deadwax. So you've got your music on the grooves, and then the empty area between the grooves and the label here is called the runout, or the deadwax again. And in there are some numbers, and then there's a little marking that is not very legible here, but I'll try to get a photo here. It says KPG at CA. That stands for Kevin P. Gray at Coherent Audio, and this record was mastered by Kevin Gray. He's a very famous, very respected audio engineer who does the masterings of lots of jazz records now. Lots of records of all sorts, but jazz people get really excited when Kevin Gray does the mastering. He's kind of one of two big names in 2021 in mastering. The other would be Ryan K. Smith at a place called Sterling Sound. Kevin Gray's mastering studio is called Coherent Audio. So what's mastering? Mastering is the process of taking some source that's not on a record, usually a tape, an analog tape in this case, but it could be digital files, and making the stamper for a record, and making the lacquer rather, which can then be turned into the metal stampers that actually create the record. So, sorry, I'm trying to put this back in and talk at the same time. The mastering engineer has quite a bit of control over the final sound of the product and the perceived quality of the product. Again, the two most respected names in jazz in 2021 in mastering reissues would be Ryan K. Smith and Kevin Gray. What the mastering engineer does is actually take the source material, and they have something called a lathe, and they take a blank record, looks like a record, it's made of a different material, and they run the audio signal through to their lathe, and there are little things that kind of act like speakers attached to a cutting head, and it actually carves the grooves in the lacquer. You could play the lacquer on a record player. It's the same type of signal as a record. Once the lacquer is cut, then it is coated in metal and then used to create the stamper parts that'll be used at the pressing plant. The two kind of boutique respected pressing plants in the United States right now are, one's called RTI, Record Technology Incorporated, run by a guy, Rick Hashimoto, and the other one is QRP, Quality Record Pressings, run by someone named Chad Kassem. There are other pressing plants out there. A very popular one is called GZ in the Czech Republic. You've got Palace and Optimal. I believe those are both in Germany, and people make a big deal about where their records come from if they get way into the hobby. For example, if there was a new Contemporary Records, the recording company that did a lot of famous jazz records, like Sonny Rollins' Way Out West, for example. If there was a Contemporary reissue series announced, and the Kraft Records, who owns the rights to that label, said, we're doing all analog reissue series of Contemporary records that's going to be mastered. Half of them will be mastered by Kevin Gray, half of them will be mastered by Ryan K. Smith. the record collecting jazz world would be super excited, and if they said, and we're going to have them pressed at GZ Media, for the 6 months between the announcement and when the records came out, people would be wringing their hands about how awful these records were going to be. The records I have from GZ are fine, but like I said, people make a big deal about it. Now, what do we do about re-sleeving? This is kind of hard to get back in there. I'm not going to even try. A lot of people keep their records in an outer sleeve. So like a big bag that the cover would go into, and then they would put the record behind it. And it does a couple things. One, it's just easier if you have one of these types of sleeves, inner sleeves. The other thing, though, is when you have the record inside of the jacket, like this, oh, I got it, you can get what's called ringwear. That the record is in here. If you have your records in too close to each other and you're pulling this out, it's applying a little bit of pressure and friction as you put the record out and you put it back in. Over time, it can cause the most wear on the outer edge of where the record is underneath this. And so you'll see if you go to like a thrift store, like a worn out ring here, it's called ringwear. Again, I personally don't really mind that stuff, but if you care, the way to prevent that is to put your records in outer sleeves, because then you're reducing the amount of friction between the jackets anyways. Don't stack them too close, and then you can also just store the records outside of there. So that's like, I wasn't going to say everything you need to know, but you don't need to know anything. Just enjoy your records. It's a fun hobby. But that's what would be handy to know before you wade into a discussion or reading about these things online, because they use a lot of acronyms. So you could say, oh, it's going to be mastered by a KPG at CA. That's Kevin Gray at Coherent Audio. Or pressed at QRP, Quality Record Pressings in Salina, Kansas. That's Chad Kassem's outfit. So I hope this helps, and welcome to the hobby. I'll be making another video shortly about some specific Blue Note reissue series that have come out in the past few years. The Blue Note 80th, which is now the Blue Note Classic series, and the Blue Note Tone Poet series. So I hope you'll check that out too. Thanks.